Thanks for tuning in. You're watching ARIRANG News. It's 2 p.m. here in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories making headlines at this hour. The top U.S. military commander in South Korea says Seoul and Washington need a layered ballistic missile defense capability to counter threats from North Korea. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says what's more important than the timing of a possible U.S. rate hike is at what pace it will raise the rate. He adds the uncertainties for Korea have grown bigger. And the Islamic State militant group claims responsibility for a gun attack in Tunisia that killed at least 20 foreign tourists on Wednesday. Local police make 9 arrests in the investigation. But first, another hint that the U.S. might be mulling over deploying its missile defense system called THAAD to South Korea. To defense officials in Washington, the top U.S. military general in South Korea emphasized the importance of having a layered ballistic missile defense capability in the South. Kim Hyun-bin has the story.
The commander of U.S. Forces Korea is calling on Seoul and Washington to implement a layered ballistic missile defense capability. And another strong signal that the U.S. is keen to deploy the THAAD system to the Korean peninsula. In a written testimony to the U.S. House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense on Thursday, General Curtis Scaparrotti stressed the need for a ballistic missile defense capability in South Korea due to the threat posed by North Korea. On the same day, an official from the U.S. Defense Department said Washington is prepared to hold official talks with Seoul about the possible deployment of THAAD, as there have been no formal consultations thus far. The ongoing speculation about the possible deployment of THAAD to South Korea has stirred controversy inside and outside of Korea. China and Russia are deeply opposed to THAAD being on their regional doorstep, saying it would infringe upon their national security. On the other hand, its supporters say THAAD will counter North Korea's increasing ballistic and missile threats. The U.S. also believes the threat posed by North Korea has become even more acute. Scaparrotti says that Pyongyang has the ability to produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can be mounted on top of a ballistic missile. North Korea has conducted 3 nuclear bomb tests, the first in 2006, the second in 2009, and the most recent coming in February 2013. Experts predict the potential 4th testing will be to test a miniaturized warhead. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of nuclear warheads, a nuclear expert in the U.S. maintains that North Korea could have up to 100 nuclear weapons by the year 2020. Defending his original claim, Joel Witt, an analyst for the North Korea monitoring website 38 North, said his theory was not beyond the realm of possibility. Witt added that U.S. scientists have long known the North is able to produce weapons-grade plutonium at its main nuclear plant. However, the U.S. analyst questioned South Korea's assessment that North Korea currently has 16 warheads, saying the estimation was based on assumptions only. The top diplomats of South Korea, Japan, and China will hold their first trilateral talks in 3 years in Seoul tomorrow. Korea's foreign ministry says the visiting ministers will hold separate bilateral talks with Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se ahead of the three-way meeting and pay courtesy visits to President Park Geun-hye. Topping the agenda will be talks on restoring cooperation among the 3 nations, and attention is on whether Saturday's meeting will lead to a 3-way summit in the near future. That summit had been stalled mainly due to the territorial disputes between Japan and China over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, known in China as Diaoyu. The chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee pledged his commitment to, quote, getting the historical record correct regarding Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. In a statement, Representative Ed Royce says he told a group of South Korean lawmakers about his visit to a memorial set up in Glendale, Los Angeles, to honor the so-called comfort women. The statement also mentioned that the Korean lawmakers told Royce that it is not appropriate for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to address the U.S. Congress without sincerely apologizing for Tokyo's wartime atrocities. On this, the U.S. lawmaker reportedly said nothing has been decided yet. The Japanese leader is set to visit Washington next month amid mounting calls on Abe by international community to sincerely apologize. The bodies from a fatal helicopter crash last week have been found. The chopper is believed to have crashed into the sea because of a lack of visibility with bad weather conditions, but the exact cause is still under investigation. Connie Kim reports.
The bodies of the two missing pilots from last week's helicopter crash have been found in waters off Korea's southwestern coast. The Coast Guard confirmed on Friday that the bodies are those of the captains of the ill-fated chopper. The Coast Guard helicopter carrying 4 people crashed in waters off Kagodo Island last Friday while trying to land near a seawall. 1 person is still missing. Last week, the helicopter was on a mission to transport an emergency patient to an inland hospital. This is the same helicopter that was the first to arrive at the Seoul ferry accident last April, saving 12 people. Korea's Coast Guard and Navy were immediately dispatched to the site, but strong waves and heavy fog have been hampering rescue operations for days. Due to the unfavorable weather conditions, it took rescue teams 6 days to find the fuselage using an underwater camera. Salvage teams recovered the fuselage roughly a kilometer from the port. However, with no black box in the helicopter, it's making it difficult for officials to find out what happened in the moments before the accident. Authorities say the pilots were caught out by a lack of visibility amid foggy conditions. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Following the U.S. Federal Reserve's monetary meeting this week, the Bank of Korea's chief says external economic uncertainties have gotten bigger. The governor says the pace of a possible rate increase in the U.S. is more crucial than when it starts the hike. Shin Se-min reports.
Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says that the pace of the rate increase by the U.S. Federal Reserve is more crucial than when it starts. During a meeting with local commercial bankers on Friday, the governor said that although the timing of the rate hike is important, he said more attention will be on the pace of the increase, as it will continue to rise once it starts. The top central banker's comment follows the Fed's latest indication that it's open to a possible interest rate rise on the back of improving jobs growth, moving it a step closer to increasing the rate for the first time in 9 years. Regarding this, the central banker said economic uncertainty in Korea still exists, adding that it is difficult to predict when the Fed will begin to raise its rates. The BOK last week cut the country's interest rate to a historic low of 1.75% to help boost the sluggish Korean economy. Some experts in Korea believe the country will maintain its key expansionary policy for now because tightening moves like a rate increase by the Fed also indicate possible changes in the global financial market. A U.S. rate hike could trigger a major capital outflow from Korea, as investment already made in developing economies could flow into the U.S. market, eventually forcing the BOK to raise the rate. Experts here say that major economies like Europe and Japan, with their continued monetary easing measures, should work as a buffer for the Korean economy, even if a sizable amount of money makes its way to the U.S. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Market watchers expect Samsung Electronics to sell over 50 million units of its latest Galaxy S series smartphones this year. Global market analysis provider DRAM Exchange says it has raised its 2015 sales outlook for the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge by 20% from its earlier forecast. It expects Samsung to sell 22 million Galaxy S6 units in the second quarter of the year. That's 5 million more than its previous estimate. It also projects quarterly sales to well exceed 10 million in each of the final 2 quarters of the year. Samsung debuted its Galaxy S6 series at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona early this month with ambitions to regain its lead in the global smartphone market over its rival, Apple. In these times of slowing growth and low inflation, some of the businesses in developed economies are raising salaries, and this could boost consumption and lead growth. But will Seoul follow suit? Song Ji-sun has the story.
Korea's minimum wage has been rising at a pace of 7% over the past 2 years, but opposition parties claim the pace of the hike should be over 10% to reach at least $9 per hour. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-won has been calling on corporations to raise salaries as higher income boosts consumption, leading growth. In the US and Japan, as their paychecks will be bigger than last year. Walmart last month announced that it will raise its hourly pay to $9 per hour, and other distribution companies like Target and Marshalls have also followed suit. Japanese automakers enjoying a sales hike from the weekend are also raising salaries for their employees, some for the first time in over a dozen years. Nissan, Toyota, and Honda have increased their monthly basic salaries to between $30 and $40. Germany and the UK have raised their minimum wage this year, and many European countries have a minimum wage that's double that of Seoul's. Meeting with business leaders last week, the finance minister urged companies to consider raising salaries, but business leaders were reluctant to follow, saying that could weaken their competitiveness. Choi has also scaled back, saying corporate salary is an issue negotiated between labor and management. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
The Islamic State group has claimed that it was behind the massacre at Tunisia's National Museum that left 20 foreign tourists dead. But there are some security analysts in the region who are skeptical and wonder if the group is taking credit for the work of a sympathizer. Kwon So-ah has more on the progress of the investigations.
The first drop of rain is how the Islamic State extremist group described Wednesday's attack on a museum in Tunisia. Claiming responsibility in an audio recording posted on Twitter, the terror group praised the 2 attackers killed in the mission, calling them Knights of the Islamic State. The group, however, offered no proof that it was behind the attack. In their ongoing investigations, police have made 9 arrests. 4 suspects are said to be directly linked to the gunmen. The remaining 5 are alleged to be part of a terrorist cell. Officials say the terrorists chose Bardo Museum as its proud symbol of Tunisia's historical identity.
They chose Bardo Museum, and this is not a coincidence. Bardo Museum is a place of memory, and they hate these memories. Bardo Museum is a place for history, and they hate history.
The overall death toll rose to 25 on Thursday, including 20 foreign tourists from several nations, a police officer, and the 2 gunmen who were shot dead by security forces. Nearly 50 others were hurt. But Tunisia's security services have been praised for their quick response, as the gunmen had explosives which they failed to detonate.
Surveillance will be intensified on all tourist zones in the country to avoid any other incidents like the one yesterday. It will involve all the national territory.
The attack is the deadliest to have hit Tunisia in more than a decade. The country is concerned about the impact this attack could have on its young democracy and its tourism industry, of which its economy is heavily dependent. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
We hear many success stories of female leaders breaking the glass ceiling, but even in this day and age, we also still hear a lot about gender discrimination. ARIRANG's Kim Min-ji had a chance to sit down with one leadership expert. Her name is Claudia Chan. Take a look.
Women worldwide are making strides to break down walls and create social equality, change, and a more positive environment for women. Claudia Chan, the CEO of She Global Media, a media and education company, is one of them. She's in Seoul to share her insights and empower young women so they too can make change.
Well, there's absolutely a women's revolution happening right now across the world, I believe. I've seen an unprecedented amount of organizations and activists and businesses who have been speaking up for women's rights. Being a woman is incredible, and also it brings a diversity to society. I think feminine traits are incredible qualities of collaboration and communication and empathy and vulnerability that the world needs right now.
So what improvements are needed, to foster an environment, to foster more female leaders?
It can't just be women fighting for women. We need to have the private sector. They need to create programs to get more women into higher level positions. Media is a huge vehicle as well because you have a microphone that speaks to so many women, and to share stories like this, just to create consciousness. Media creates consciousness, and consciousness is what leads to change.
So a recent report by the World Economic Forum showed that Korea ranks 117th out of 142 countries when it comes to gender inequality. So what are some of the things that Korea needs to do in order to reduce this discrepancy and foster more women leaders?
We need more initiatives to help young women coming out of college get jobs, because it's very, very difficult, more difficult for a young woman to get a job than it is for a man. That's one, so institutionalizing career programs, sponsorship programs, internship programs at universities, at corporations, that seems like a very important initiative. Number two is, women are not having children. There's a huge fertility issue here in Korea, and of course then that's not good for society and it's not good for women. So there needs to be a lot of programs and initiatives around that as well.
Do you have any advice for aspiring young women?
The number one glass ceiling to break before any of it is really the one in your mind. Having that confidence, inner confidence, is really important, and changing the voice in your mind instead of being critical, constantly critical of yourself. We need to be more loving and kind to ourselves so that our voice is giving us the confidence to go out there to do whatever it is that we want to do, to dream big and to defy the odds.
김민지, 아리랑 뉴스.
It's time to talk about the latest in the film industry. Today, Piers couldn't join us today, so Jason Bishervase is here to talk about the spy comedy Kingsman. Welcome to the program, Jason.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so Kingsman continues to draw audiences at the local box office. It has now surpassed the 5 million tickets mark now?
Yeah, 5 million admissions it surpassed yesterday. Admissions is the gauge that industry observers here in Korea look at to determine a film's success. 1 million admissions, 2 million admissions, so on and so forth. It surpassed 5 million admissions yesterday, massively successful. Despite the fact that it's an R-rated film, that means anyone under the age of 18 cannot see the film, and so that does hinder a box office potential, a film's box office potential. So it is quite significant.
Right. So Kingsman, of course, starring Colin Firth, Samuel Jackson, and what's the other?
Aaron Egerton, the Welsh actor. So he's kind of rising up the ranks, I guess, and he's now become. You see him in kind of press stories here. So you didn't see him before, but because this film has been so popular, he's certainly become a bit of a name.
Building Korean fans.
Yeah, and Colin Firth is traditionally quite popular, but this film has certainly helped him.
Okay, so now Kingsman is the most successful foreign R-rated film in Korean cinema history.
Yeah, foreign R-rated film. It's massively successful. 300 held the previous record. I think 2.9 million admissions back in 2007. It completely smashed that a few weeks ago. And like I said earlier, it's now on 5 million admissions. But in terms of revenue, I mean, observers in the US and Europe tend to look at box office revenue. I mean, this film's made around about 37 million US dollars, which is more money than any other territory outside North America. That includes the UK, where the film is based. Massively successful. It's also more successful than James Bond, the film it sets out to kind of ridicule. It's kind of a James Bond spoof in many ways.
Right. So why do you think it's so popular in Korea, though, then?
I think there's a few reasons. A film critic here called Darcy Parquet said earlier this week, actually, that in order to understand why these films do well, not just Kingsman, but other certain foreign films, you have to look at the Korean films or the film industry. And simply put, the Korean film industry doesn't have anything like this, so audiences see it as kind of unusual, unique, outlandish, but entertaining. And also, I think other factors such as the fact that it was released about a week or so before Lunar New Year, and that really helped it. And also, there wasn't that many big or mega hits here in Korea during that season.
And before the program, you were telling me that this movie has it's a bit similar to some of the movies that you mentioned, like Interstellar, Begin Again, About Time.
Exactly. Those films were massively popular, last year. About Time, The Working Title, again a British film. Begin Again is a US independent film starring Mark Ruffalo and Keira Knightley. Those two films actually made more money in Korea than anywhere else. Hugely successful. And I think part of that was down to the fact that, again, you don't see that kind of film here in Korea. The films kind of romanticize the cities, so New York City and Begin Again, and About Time in London. I think the audiences really responded well to that, and also the soundtrack as well. It wasn't overly sentimental, which you see in some kind of melodramas here. And then you have Interstellar, hugely successful, over 10 million admissions, actually kind of underperformed in the States and in the UK. But the revenue here in Korea, along with China, where it generated over $100 million, meant that it actually performed quite well overall. Personally, I think the film, Christopher Nolan, director, shares some similarities to kind of Bong Joon-ho in that he's able to make kind of an intellectual film, but that's also quite successful. But nonetheless, you would not see kind of the Interstellar, the film on that scale here in Korea, although I think it is kind of similar to Snowpiercer in some ways.
But you say the local box office last month saw a drop in terms of the people that were willing to go to the cinema.
Yeah, February saw a significant drop, 5.3% in terms of revenue. So I think around $11.8 million. That is like over 5% drop. And then in viewers as well. I mean, it was over 10%. Is
that a yearly drop or monthly?
Yeah. Compared to the year earlier.
Before,
now that's the Seoul now, Lunar Year, is actually a day shorter last year. It was a day longer this year. Why is there a significant drop? I think it's because there were mega hits last year. You had Frozen, which went on to make over 10 million admissions, and also the local comedy Miss Granny, which had amassed over 8 million admissions. So you had those two big films that collected huge tallies. And while Kingsman and Detective K2, Secret of the Lost Island, they actually did well. I mean, Kingsman did very well for an R-rated film, but it wasn't a mega hit in the same way as like Frozen last year. And again, 2 years ago, you had Miracle in the Cell #7. So there is a drop, but I don't think there's cause for big alarm.
And next month, you say we have a huge film that's coming our way, and with, of course, many fans of the Avengers in Korea will be excited to
Walt
finally
Disney,
see the
Pictures
film.
Korea announced this week, a little bit late, but nonetheless, they have announced that the release date for Korea is April 23rd, and that is before the American release date, although it does roll out in some territories on April 22nd. The film was shot, parts of it shot here in Seoul last March and April. Huge press exposure. It's bound to be absolutely massive, and so the industry, I think, is going to be very well. Cinemas, multiplexes next month will be very busy indeed.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Jason, for coming in today and giving us all the details about Kingsman and, of course, the Avengers as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today is going to be as unseasonably warm as yesterday, getting up near the 20s in lots of parts of the country. But always keep in mind that this applies only during the day, while there are huge temperature drops in the evening hours. Now we are mostly under partly cloudy skies with a bit of fog. The clouds will mostly clear out as the day progresses, though there will still be some lingering fog. Now keep an eye on the fine dust index as well, because the levels are pretty high, and especially here in the capital area and in Gangwon-do province. And that's expected to expand the surrounding regions. Now with that in mind, let's have a look at the readings for today. Seoul will be getting up to 22 this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will get up to 18 and 16 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 16, Dokdo is down to 11, while Mount Kumgang is at 9 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap from us at this hour. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Another edition of ARIRANG News with me coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time.